and welcome to Let's Talk with Parul. Going to be a very tough conversation today. It is a tough topic and something we wouldn't wish on our worst enemies, but it's unfortunately a reality that cannot be wished away by ignoring it. Child sexual abuse. We spend our lives as parents doing the best we can for our children, for their happiness, for their well being, and I think most importantly, for their safety. Keeping our children safe from sexual predators is high on that list. And in today's conversation, we will go over exactly that. Let's understand what all can be considered sexual abuse of children in the first place, and then the basic guidelines of prevention. And however uncomfortable it is to think about the worst nightmare coming true, let's also understand that in case, God forbid, our child is abused, we also need to know how to respond. And helping us navigate these tough but important questions is our expert for the day, JUANITA Kakotty. Thank you so much for joining us, JUANITA.
Thank you, Parul. Thank you for inviting Arpan to be part of Mom's Presso platform today. I really look forward to the conversation today.
Let me just give a short introduction. JUANITA is the Senior Manager, Advocacy and Training at Arpan. Arpan is an NGO working in the area of prevention of child sexual abuse for over 15 years. JUANITA has more than a decade of experience in the social development sector. She's also an external member on committees for various schools and organizations, guiding them to create an enabling and protective environment for children. You know, JUANITA, like I mentioned, I think it's important to first understand that child sexual abuse does not necessarily always include physical contact between the perpetrator and a child. A child cannot understand nor consent to any form of sexual activity or abusive activity, and all that can impact the child's mental, emotional, or physical welfare in devastating ways. So let's start by asking you about what can be understood to be child sexual abuse.
Right, Parul. You have actually brought up a very important point. When we are talking about child sexual abuse, we are not just limited to an understanding that child sexual abuse can happen or happens only when there is contact or touch. But before I go on, and I'm very sorry about the noise in the background, but before I go on about how to understand child sexual abuse, I want to tell you that we have to look at it within the dynamics of a relationship. So a child is always sexually abused by somebody who is more powerful than the child. Now, who is more powerful than the child? Somebody who is in a position of authority, who is responsible for the child, somebody who is, say, more charismatic than the child. You know, the sources of power can be varied. But whenever this more powerful person, now this more powerful person is aware that he or she is more powerful than the child, and the child is also aware about this fact. Now, whenever this more powerful person uses the child for their sexual gratification, it is a case of child sexual abuse. So what is important to remember here is the intent of the more powerful person, the intention of the act, of the gesture, of the words spoken. It is this intention that separates child sexual abuse from inappropriate behavior. For example, just to give a case, say somebody accidentally touches the private body parts of a child without the intention of sexual gratification. This is not child sexual abuse. This is inappropriate behavior. So it is really important for us to remember that intent is really important. Now, as you said, child sexual abuse can happen through touch. Yeah. So if somebody touches the private body parts of a child for sexual gratification, or asks the child to touch their private body parts for the more powerful person's sexual gratification, then it is a clear-cut case of sexual abuse. I also want to highlight here that even when private body parts are not involved, say the person touches the child anywhere on the body with the intention of sexual gratification, even that is the case of child sexual abuse, any part of the body, not just private body parts. Now, coming to something that you highlighted, Parul, there can also be cases of sexual abuse without any touch involved at all. And what are those cases? Which are those cases? For example, using a child to create pornography, showing pornography to a child, or say, say the child, the person goes on to the, say, Facebook profile or Instagram profile of the child, and posts lewd comments, or puts in comments which are sexual of in nature. So these are also examples of child sexual abuse where there is no touch involved, either in a physical space or on an online space.
Right. So actually, I mean, that's exactly what one needs to understand, that, and when you say that even the touch needn't be sexual in nature to the extent of private body parts, that's another thing I think most people misunderstand. That and I guess it just gets murkier and murkier to prove when you're in this kind of space. Um,
Yes,
like
so
I said, it's a parent's worst nightmare. You wouldn't ever want to be in that situation. When you mentioned talked about pornographic images or movies or whatever, what about talk, obscene talk, text messages, or maybe phone call or something like that? Is that also a part of it? Can it be considered?
yes, it is also part of child sexual abuse. And as I said earlier, the intention is very important. Now, just to, you never know, which is why conversations, as parents,
Right.
we have to have, conversations, regular conversations with our children on what is safe for them and what is unsafe for them. I am saying this especially because we are now talking about the online space, and even if I look at my child, she does her classes online as her friends, and a huge percentage of children in the cities are attending online classes now, especially in private schools. What is happening there? The child is now has access to the screen. We as parents need to be careful that there's no pop-up with content that might be harmful for them, or might put them in an unsafe lead them to an unsafe situation. So we have to be very careful as parents like that. Now, in the online space or of a physical space, what can child sexual abuse look like? As you said, sexting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Sending,
Conversation,
yeah,
sexting.
sending sexual messages to the child, sending images, videos to the child, yeah, which is not appropriate for the child or the child's age. uh, bullying Bullying can also come under, yeah, child sexual abuse. What kind of bullying? I mean, as I said, if the person goes on to the Facebook page, yeah, and talks about or comments and says, oh, you got about the child's physical attributes, yeah,
Right.
your lips look luscious, why talk about all of that on a child's platform, social media platform? Stalking, cyber stalking.
Yes.
Whenever the child is online, the child sees that this other person whom the child doesn't want to interact with, or maybe the child knows even, yeah, the child maybe knows that person, but doesn't want to be, but feels uncomfortable or feels threatened by the other person's comments or visibility whenever the child is online. That's cyber stalking. It's now moved from the physical space to the online space. So these are all examples of child sexual abuse online. Yeah, and
Right.
also here I would like to say that when we talk about child sexual abuse material online, it's not
Yeah.
just the creation of such material; it is also the distribution of such material or storage of such material. That
Okay.
is,
Okay.
yeah, that is not
That comes
allowed.
under the purview. Right.
Yeah, yeah, that comes under POCSO.
So you mentioned about a child feeling threatened or uncomfortable, and I'm sure that must be very common. I mean, when a case of child abuse happens, more than often, I'm sure the child must be threatened to keep shut, must be made to feel insecure about their own role in their entire episode, and a child may not quite be able to disclose that something has happened with him or her at home to mama and papa. But I'm sure as parents, there are things that we can pick up on. So, let's go over that. What do you think we should be aware and vigilant about in our household to make sure that our children are not going through a trauma like that?
Sure, Parul. And I would like to, look at it from two sides. I would like to address two sides to the same question here.
Sure.
A, as you said, the child goes through a lot. Sexual abuse has an impact on the child. The child could be undergoing a lot of feelings, emotions. The child might feel threatened, as you said. The child might be confused. The child might not understand why did somebody do that to them. Or the child might be confused if the child send out messages that the other person could do whatever they have done with them. So the child might be fearful, might feel threatened, and therefore keep shut. Or the child might also feel a lot of anger because the child thought that the child did something to, because of which whatever happened. Or the child might feel anger because of the helplessness that the child felt at having been subjected to that experience by another person. So because of all these factors, there are a lot of emotions that the child would go through, and we can see signs in the child. The anguish that the child is going through, the mental preoccupation that the child is going through. We can see signs of that, indicators of that in the child's behavior, in the patterns that we observe in the child's actions or speech. So we as parents can stay alert to that. And what could be certain signs, Parul? For instance, we have noticed that on ground, we have noticed that the child might become very quiet, not want to interact with others. So there's a kind of social withdrawal. Or the child might become very aggressive. The child might become hostile, because of the helplessness that the child felt, and because of which the anger kind of seeped in, the rage at not having been able to keep oneself safe. Or maybe the child tried to seek help, but the child couldn't communicate, didn't know how to communicate. Or the person that the child went up to seek help, that person didn't understand what the child was trying to say, so couldn't help. Because of all this also, the child can feel a lot of rage, a lot of aggression. Now there are other signs as well. Maybe we'll talk about it later. But as parents, what can we do? We need to be alert about these signs. Now, I'm not saying that these are signs, indicators of sexual abuse only. These could be indicators, or this could be signs of other forms of abuse, or maybe no abuse has happened, but the child is showing some sign or indicator. But you need to follow up. You need to, as a parent, we need to find out why is the child behaving in this particular way. And just to make sure that our child is safe, we need to have that kind of a conversation, bring it up with our children. Now, coming to the second part of your question, which I'm calling it second part, although it is one particular question. Right. Coming to the second part of your question, why is the child not able to articulate? The child is, as I said, because maybe the child doesn't have the language to articulate it, doesn't know how to talk about it. Secondly, maybe the child tried to articulate in some way, but the parent didn't understand, because the parent is also perhaps not equipped to understand something as sexual abuse or abuse.
That's for sure.
Absolutely. So you can't blame the child, nor can you blame the parent, because that awareness is not there, that understanding is not there, right? Which is why it is so important to kind of even have conversations with parents on how to talk about safety with your child. Yeah. And also, it's important to talk about personal safety education with children so that they know how to seek help if they are in an unsafe situation. First, they need to identify what is an unsafe situation. Yeah, so something like personal safety education helps them there. How do you identify an unsafe situation? And then secondly, most importantly, how do you seek help? Right? And then we simultaneously need to equip the parent to understand that the child is seeking help. We need to help the child. The child is reaching out to us. We do, often it happens, we have heard survivors and victims talk about how they tried talking to their parent as a child about an experience of sexual abuse. They thought of it as you know there was touch, of course. It wasn't penetrative, this particular case, but the parent didn't understand, and the parent said, nothing, that person can't do it, or maybe that person accidentally touched you there,
Yeah. Don't make a fuss about it. Yeah.
don't make a fuss about it. And then the survivors have spoken about how that kind of shut the window for them to seek help in future. They thought, oh, then if my parent can't understand me, nobody else will. What's the point going and talking about it and expecting somebody to help me if I'm in such a situation? So such things happen, which is why it's very important to bring parents and children at the level where they can have conversations around such issues. And again, Parul, when I say conversations are important, it is very important that we keep in mind the importance of language.
Let's go over that, in fact, JUANITA. I mean, let's go step by step. I'd like you to first, tell us at what age do we start talking to them? What do we talk about? At each age, I'm sure the language also changes. So let's first talk about age-appropriate conversations, what exactly to say to our children, and then let's get on to the very, very sensitive and uncomfortable topic about if it's happened. How do we as parents make sure that, we don't dismiss the child and we don't negate their emotions and their reality? So let's start from the beginning. When do we start these conversations and how?
Yes, absolutely. So as I said, the language is very important. And again, when I say language, we need to keep in mind foremost that so when we're speaking to children, the language has to be about their safety. What is safe and unsafe for them? Yeah. And when we are speaking from that language, it then becomes empowering for the child. The child doesn't then live in a state of fear. Oh, this might make me, subject to or prone to abuse. I have to be careful. So that the child won't be in a state of alert all the time, right? So if we give them an empowering language, if we tell them, okay, let's identify what is safe and unsafe for you so that you know what is unsafe, you know how to keep away from what is unsafe, you know that you have to keep away from the unsafe, and if you're ever in an unsafe situation, you need to seek help from a trusted or an adult who will help you, from a trusted adult or any other adult around you, within your reach, who can help you. So this is the language that we need to speak to our children. And secondly, as you said, we have to give them age-appropriate information. Here, I would like to bring in, what Arpan has done in this area. For instance, over the last 15 years, Arpan has been running this personal safety education program. It has modules from pre-primary till grade 10. These are courses available online for free, and there are also lesson plans to be done in schools, and there are many schools which are now implementing Arpan's personal safety education on ground. Now, what is and we have also kind of contributed personal safety education messages and lesson plans to state and national curriculum for schools across the country. But what is important here is that, and I want to tell you this, that when we do something like this in a structured manner with children, then we have seen that children are able to retain the messages. Children are not frightened of life. Children are not frightened of other people, but children know that help is available, that they can seek help. They know which are the sources for help. So it empowers them like that. And Parul, you can check out Arpan's website, where you have these resource books. We have the booklet, okay, caregivers and like parents and teachers and others, where you have these Q&As. We have collected these questions over the years, and we have tried to provide answers, like, appropriate answers to the questions raised by children, questions raised by parents, by teachers, appropriate answers to these questions, right? So if your child comes up to you and talks to you about a particular situation, without getting, without feeling a challenge, if you go through these resources, you will know how to talk to the child. So the first thing is, example, giving age appropriate information. You
so
don't
what
have
is
to,
it? Sorry, I'll just interrupt you. Just to start, we have a question from Narendra Gopati. He's asking, how do we tell our children to know what is good touch and bad touch when they come across these situations with strangers? I also know that there is a terminology change. We did have, a lot of sessions on good touch, bad touch, but we are now referring to it as safe touch and unsafe touch. So let's just understand a little bit about that, because I know everybody is still, we still have the good touch terminology in our heads. A lot of us haven't understood why we have moved to safe and unsafe.
Yeah. Thank you, Narendraji, for bringing up this question. It's a very important question. And as Parul says, we have moved away from good touch and bad touch. We are now talking about safe and unsafe touch, and pedagogically worldwide. Now, why are we doing that? Just to give you one example, it was seen that children to whom bad touch had happened had started perceiving themselves as bad people, and that required another kind of healing then. So we are actually making, the child actually gets into another complex layer when we were using the good touch and bad touch. Plus, it was also very difficult. It is also very difficult and very moralistic to say this is good and that is bad. So we wanted to shift away from that terminology, and now we have been using worldwide safe and unsafe touch. Again, why safe and unsafe touch? For instance, an unsafe situation happens to the child. The child here thinks, I am unsafe. Therefore, I need to get out of this unsafe situation and seek help from an adult who will be able to help me. The thing here is, when the child, in this case, when the child is using the terminology safe and unsafe, what is happening? If you look at the thought process, the child thinks, I am unsafe. The child is not thinking, I am bad, or something bad has happened to me. The child doesn't get into that. The child is only focusing on the fact that the child is unsafe. Yeah, which is why, to make it, to help the child to not let more layers of complexities to seep in or creep in, this pedagogical move has happened, and it is really helpful. It is helpful for the child. Yes.
Right.
And also how to teach
them.
Yeah.
Sorry, on the one hand, we're trying to tell the child that, this is not your fault. And then that child is, talking about good and bad, and starts, like you said, starts feeling, oh, maybe I'm bad. And yeah, it's very tough for a child to deal with that in any case.
Absolutely. Right. And Parul, just to get back to Narendraji's question, how do we teach what is safe and unsafe for children? We teach them what is safe and unsafe, as I said, in an age-appropriate manner. The personal safety messages are the same. What are the personal safety messages? For instance, no one can look at your touch, talk about your private body parts, except to keep them clean or healthy. Right. So that this is, for instance, one personal safety message. Another personal safety message is, if you find yourself in an unsafe situation, say no to the other person. Even if you can't say no to the other person, think of no in your mind and try and get away from that situation. And in that message, it is included that if you can't get away from that unsafe situation, it is not your fault. When we tell the child, when we don't blame the child for the situation, and we tell the child it is not your fault that you are or you were in an unsafe situation, that's like the first step towards healing. Yeah. So it's very important. And then, of course, another personal safety message is like, talk to a trusted adult, helping adult, about the unsafe situation, so that they can get you out of the unsafe situation if you're still in that unsafe situation, or can prevent it from happening again. So another thing that we have to keep in mind, Narendraji, is, say with little children, we don't have to talk about what is, say, a healthy relationship or harmful relationship. This kind of conversations we can have with all the children. Yeah, what are those harmful relationships whereby you can be in an unsafe situation? What are the healthy relationships because they keep you in a safe situation? So age, according to the age, we have these conversations. To just to bring one example, if you look at child development, there is a limitation to what a child can do at every stage. Now
Stage.
so to a 2-year old, if you want your 2-year-old child to pick up a language, you can't get a book, give the child the book and say, now start reading and pick up the language. You can't do that, right? But what you can do is you can read out the book to the child, and the child listens to you and picks up words and sentences, right? Similarly, at for every aspect, even for in terms of sexually, what is it that the child can do? There's a limitation in every stage. So for example, if a 9-year-old is trying to replicate sexual intercourse with somebody else, we need to find out, where did the child see this? Did the child see it on screen? Did it happen to the child? Did the
Where is
child
it
see
coming
it?
from?
Where is it coming from? And we have to do all of this without being judgmental, without threatening the child. We have to be, we have to show empathy, and we have to not blame the child when we are doing all of this. So when we are talking, our body language, the words we are communicating with the child, we have to be very careful and keep all these things in mind when we are having these conversations with them.
Right. It is a tricky conversation at every stage. I don't, deny that, but it is a conversation we must have.
Parul,
Sometimes,
just to bring in,
yes.
just to bring in one more important point, you can start personal safety education very early with children.
Okay.
Yeah,
How early would that be? As soon as they are able to comprehend what we're saying?
5, 6 years, you can start, right? And to tell you, with my child, for instance, Arpan has a My Safety book for toddlers, and it makes conversations easier. So I gave that book to my daughter, and I also gifted it to her friends. The beauty is, I saw that now my child is 9 years old, and I did this like a few years ago.
Okay.
The beauty is they could talk about private body parts without shame, without
Because you've
inhibition,
normalized it.
because you've normalized it. And for, say, for a 6-year-old, for a 7-year-old, for an 8-year-old, you don't have to tell the child what the function of the private body part is. So this is giving age appropriate information. You just tell the child, this is your body, this body part is called so and so. Yes. And the idea is you need to know the names of every part of the body, so that if something ever happens to that part of the body, you can go and tell someone that, I have a funny feeling here, or I got hurt here, or somebody did this to me in this part of my body. And once we take that shame away from the child is then able to talk about it and seek help. So, this was one example about age
No, this is great.
appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we need to know, that
Yes.
how do I frame my sentences? How do I put
Yes.
it all together?
Yes.
So
And
one
then,
thing
Parul, just to link it here, now as a parent, the child knows there is no shame in saying that, I got hurt around my, say, vulva or penis. I got hurt, my penis hurts. The child knows that there is no shame in saying that. But if the parent gets worried when the child says something like that, starts fretting, the parent doesn't know how to address that, then what is the point of empowering the child? Who will help the child then? Right. So the parent has to be equally aware that why we need
that
to,
is
why it is okay and perfectly normal to take the names of private body parts with children of that age. It is perfectly normal. So the parent also has to be convinced why that is important.
No, I think that's a great point, because I think a lot of us especially for younger children, you use all kinds of, nicknames and euphemisms for body parts just because you're uncomfortable with it. You don't know how to, say that out loud. But
Yes.
it's time we get around to it, that out of our systems, that discomfort.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
a common thing we've all told our children is, your swimsuit areas are what you need to protect. Is there any other way of saying that? I mean, like, of course, they understand private body parts at some stage, but is there any other way of, telling them that, look, this is completely private. Nobody touches you. Nobody talks about it. Nobody has any access to it except for, your trusted adult who cleans you and, like you said, takes care of your health. So a doctor, for example. Is there any other way to tell children that?
Ideally, Parul, looking at the strides we have made, globally, where we are and where we have come, we should be able to take the names of private body parts, because even today what happens is there are cases where women go to the doctor, there's pain around the vaginal area, but would go and say, I have a pain in my stomach.
Stomach, yes.
So examination and treatment goes on for the stomach pain, and so the woman doesn't get cured. Yeah. And the woman has to undergo that pain for so many days, for so many months, because the woman was not able to say that I have a pain around my vaginal area. So in today's age, at least, and where we are, we should be able to say that, there's pain around my vulva, there's pain in my around my penis, and my breast, my left breast, right breast has a pain or something. We should be able to say that without shame. Yes, without shame. Now,
Great point.
yeah. So yes. So, but the point is, the reality is there are many areas, or there are many cases where we have still not made that leap, in terms of our language, in terms of communication, in terms of leaving the shame behind. That has not happened. And in those areas, the preferred language is still parts of the body covered by swimsuit, parts of the body covered by the undergarment. Yeah, undergarment.
Right. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
That too. So this is what is said.
Yeah. So I guess that's where we need to progress from. That, like you said, that was probably last decade, and as in today's day and age, we should be able to move away from there.
Yes.
Right. As children grow up, they understand the meaning of consent. What age do you think that would happen, and how can children be taught about consent? I mean, is it something that they should be able to understand right from, say, toddler stage of 4 or 5 or whatever, or do you think it is a comprehension which sets in a little later?
Parul, see, when there's a difference when you talk about consent in sex education and in personal safety education. Yeah.
Right.
I will not speak much about consent vis-a-vis sex education, because that's not my area of expertise. But I can bring in an element of what you are trying to ask in personal safety, in the personal safety education area. So what happens in personal safety education is you're teaching the child to respect one's own body as well as that of the other person, right? You're teaching the child to respect also personal boundaries. Yeah. What is it that makes you feel uncomfortable? You have the right to say no to it. This is what is being taught through personal safety education. Now, this is not necessarily, in connection to something that is sexual in nature. It could be anything, right? So we are also teaching the child the technique to say no to whatever it is that makes them uncomfortable. Why is this important?
That's my point, essentially, that if something makes me uncomfortable, I have the power of consent. I can say no, and I can say it out loud. So that was exactly what I was trying to get
and also
at.
Parul, why is it important? It is important because so that yes, tell me. You were
because
saying
it makes
something.
me uncomfortable as a child. I know what makes me confused or just scared, maybe just fear. I mean, I don't know
Absolutely.
if I got that right.
And no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And to add to it, helplessness. When
Helpless,
the
of course.
when the child sees that every time the child says no, nobody pays attention to it, the child
Yeah.
will learn that saying no is not useful. The child will also learn helplessness, and the child might live with that helplessness. And when sexual abuse or any kind of abuse actually happens in the future, the child will endure that with helplessness and not seek help, not say no, So this is where it is connected. Consent then becomes important.
Yeah, that's a great point, that the child should always feel empowered. That
Yes.
at the end of the day, safety
Yeah.
is something that I can control to some extent, at least.
Yes, absolutely.
So we've talked about what to say to a child. We've talked about basically the key elements that need to change as a child grows. Now, and you said, you so rightly pointed out that at the end of the day, it's also up to the parents. How sensitively are the parents responding to what we're teaching the child? So what happens now? Like, worst case scenario, my child comes up to me and says that something has happened. How should I react? What is it that first I mean, what is the first thing that I should do? How do I seek help? Who do I call? I definitely would, like to call an expert. I don't think I am able to, in any position, to handle a situation like that on my own. So, what are the resources I can call? Who do I complain to? Let's just, go over that briefly. That yes, if something bad does happen, what do we do?
Sure. So, Parul, when a child comes up to the parent and talks about an experience of sexual abuse, it is very important for the parent to first listen to the child and believe the
Believe.
child. Yeah, because if the body language of the parent is such, it's giving the message that, oh, I don't believe what you are saying, I don't believe, I think that's a story you just made up, the child will immediately stop talking, or the child will never come up to the parent again to talk about such an experience. So it's very important that as parents we listen to the child. We show through our the emotions in our the emotions that we reflect while listening to the child. The child should be convinced that yes, this person believes what I'm saying, this person doesn't think that I'm making up a story. So that's number one. Secondly, don't dismiss what the child is saying. Don't say, oh, that, no, 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 rubbish. That uncle can't do this. That auntie is a dear person, dear friend of mine, can't. Don't dismiss the child or whatever the child is saying. Yeah. Help the child, paraphrase, help the child to understand why the child is feeling like that. Help the child to make the connection between what happened, the action, what the action precisely that is making the child feel like that, so that the child can articulate the feeling better, the experience better with the parent. Yeah. And also it's very important not to panic. Don't panic, because the child will then feel, oh my god, I shouldn't have come and spoken about it, look what I've
Yeah.
done to my parent. I've made their life miserable by talking about it. So don't panic. Again, don't make the child repeat the story. Oh, Ajao, come and talk to this uncle, come and talk to your dad about it, come and talk to your grandma about it, tell them. No, don't make the child repeat the story, because remember, sexual abuse is traumatic. Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage for the child to come up and talk about it. I mean, look at the Me Too movement. Adults needed a Me Too movement to talk about sexual abuse. Think about children, because children are anyways more vulnerable, right? They're vulnerable because of their age. They're vulnerable also, if the social setting has been such that the child has been brought up to listen to adults, the child has been brought up to obey mostly. It's very difficult for a child to come and talk about it. If the child has been brought up with the concept of family honor and all of that, it's very difficult for the child to talk about it. So it's important that we don't make the child repeat the story, because by repeating the story, the child will be going through that experience again and again, and it will further traumatize the child. And most importantly, never take the child to the offender and say, this person has done it, right? Or start threatening or abusing that person, saying that, oh, I know the story, and how dare you, not in front of the child. This will be further traumatizing, because if you look at the statistics, child sexual abuse is complex, and we know that mostly it is somebody known to the child that subjects the child to sexual abuse. In such a scenario where the child knows the person, confronting that person with another adult might be very, very uncomfortable and difficult for the child. So these are certain things that we have to keep in mind. And most importantly, something I've been repeating again and again, tell the child it's not your fault. Now, suppose the sexual abuse is ongoing. First thing we have to do is we have to stop it from happening again. We have to get the child out of that unsafe situation. How do we do that? Don't spring a surprise on the child. Don't call on the police. Don't call on any other agency and surprise the child by saying, okay, now I got the police, now I got this agency, we need to put the culprit behind the bars, therefore talk to them about it. No, please inform the child, prepare the child. Even when you think that you want to take the child to a counselor, tell the child that I have a friend, or I have a colleague, or I know somebody who will be able to talk to you and help you handle your emotions about the whole experience. Prepare the child. It's always wise to do that, and also better for the child. So these are certain things that we have to keep in mind, Parul, when the child comes and talks to us. You know what, Parul, we can, if the parents are willing at Mom's Press, so you can just go to Arpan's website. We have these, as I had said earlier. Yeah, we have these booklets, and we have questions, as I said, collected over the years with appropriate responses. So, if your child comes up to you and tells you, this has happened to me, you will get the language. You will know how you have to speak to the child. What are the words that you have to use? What are the emotions that you have to use?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I would, in fact, encourage all of our viewers to, the link has already been put in the comments, and please do go check out the resources, because we all do need these. And my question to you, JUANITA, is that, like you said, you just mentioned that in most cases, the perpetrator is known to the family, is known to the child. I think that is the biggest breach of trust and safety as far as a child is concerned. How does one go about reestablishing that feeling of trust and safety in the child? I mean, I'm sure it must be a huge task, but it does fall on the parents, responsibility to do that. How do we go about doing something like that?
Yes, it's important, but I would advise, and this is not just me, it's the Arpan as an organization, we advise that you send the child for counseling, because the professional experts are there just to help you deal with these emotions, to deal with these situations. It's very important.
And I think the parents would need that as well. I mean, not just the child. I'm sure the parents need to be counseled as well, because it's emotionally turbulent for the entire family.
Absolutely. So just to kind of, I would like to bring up two examples here, Parul. Yeah, why parents also need to be educated on these matters. So we were doing this training with a group of teachers in Delhi. And we did this session on handling disclosure. Arpan, by the way, runs these modules. We conduct sessions on understanding child sexual abuse, how to implement personal safety education with children, how to handle disclosures effectively, so that the child is not further traumatized. So we do these sessions, and after the session, one of our sessions, this teacher, and I was actually doing that session, she came up to me and she said that many years ago, her child must have been about 9 or 10 years old at that time. Her child had come to her and disclosed about an experience of sexual abuse. And she said, I didn't realize it at that time that something like that could be sexual abuse. So I told her, don't think too much about it. Just leave it behind. Don't think about it. She thought she handled it very well by telling her child, ज़्यादा मत सोचो इसके बारे में, टाइम मत खराब करो, एनर्जी मत डालो इसमें सोच के. She thought that was like the effective way of handling it. Now, so many years later, she told me that now I understand how ineffective that was, because later on, and she said that her teenager, actually her equation with her child was never really smooth, and they always had conflicts, and she said that my child till today, she doesn't want to talk to me. Sometimes I feel there is something wrong, and I tell her, why don't you open up and talk to me? And she says, what's the point talking to you? You'll not understand anyway. And then she told me, now I understand why.
Yeah.
The impact of how I handled the disclosure has actually brought her and me to this point today. This realization, Parul, is very important. Yes.
If you shut a child down at a very crucial stage, and at a time when the child was feeling vulnerable, it's bound to happen that child's not going to be able to come back to you that easily. Great point for all of us to know.
Yes, so it's very important for us as parents to read up on how to have these conversations, to engage with organizations and experts working in the area. The language has also evolved over the years, how to talk to children about these issues. Yeah.
I mean, even these 5 years, we've gone from good touch, bad touch to safe, unsafe. So yes, everything.
Yes.
Most of the children are coming with some learned information already because of the exposure to social media, because of their interaction with other children. They're already coming with half-baked information. So Priya Bhatt has a question: what age should all of this information start going out? And I think that's just the point, that as early as possible, by the time you mentioned 4, 5, 6 years of age. So something that a little takeaway for parents as we close this session, what is a thought that they should go away with? So if we can just recap the points of prevention you were talking about.
Absolutely. So for prevention, it's very important for us parents to have, as I said, conversations with our children. Yeah, it's really important. There should be scope for open communication. Our children, we should, communicate with our children in such a way. We should kind of respond to what our children are saying in such a manner that in no point should the child think that, oh, if I say this, if I talk about this experience with my parent, they will freak out, or they will scold me, or they will punish me. Yeah, the child should not have these thoughts, and it is it's our responsibility as parents to bring up our children in such a way that the communication channel is open between the two of us. Even if a child goes through an experience which is unsafe for them, it's important for us not to blame them. Yeah, it's important for us to tell them it's not your fault, because nobody invites an unsafe situation to oneself. Yeah. Right? And if you were caught in an unsafe situation, it's not your fault. So that confidence, that message we have to give out to our children, regularly be in touch with them. We should know what's happening in their lives, who are their friends, who are they spending time with, online, how they're spending their time, what is it that they know online. Yeah. So these are important things. And most importantly, handling disclosures effectively is very, very important. If a child comes up to you, please don't dismiss the child. Please don't panic. Please don't tell the child, oh, because you are wearing such clothes, therefore this happened, and I have been telling you don't wear such clothes. No. Don't tell the child, why did you go to that park? Why did you go to that area when nobody was there, which was not well lit? Why did you go there? Therefore this happened. We shouldn't. We ought not to talk to our children like that, because they will never again communicate with us about any unsafe situation in the future. So these are certain things, Parul, that I would like our parents today to be mindful of. And please read up as much as you can. Do visit Arpan's website. I'm sure, as we have reached out to over 1.6 million children and adults so far. They found our resources helpful. So maybe I'm sure you'll also find it helpful.
Absolutely. A lot of work has gone into it, and the resources are ready for us to use for sure. We have a comment from Raya who says psychoeducating caregivers is equally important. And that's absolutely true. I mean, like, at the end
Yes.
of the day, we have heard of, so many unfortunate incidents with caregivers as well. So
Yes.
education really needs awareness, and education has to be widespread and broad based for all of us.
Yes, and also Parul, I just have one suggestion. I mean, parents, you must be part of school committees and all of that.
Sure,
Push
sure.
for person safety education in your schools, because
Yeah.
systemic. It's also important to have systemic changes around these issues.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
if the appropriate age appropriate language is being taught in schools,
Right.
and parents, the schools are also engaging with parents to understand the content, to understand the language. I mean, imagine at what scale we will be doing this. We won't be doing it at one home or two homes or 15 homes. We'll be doing it at a large scale level, which is the need of the hour. So please talk to your school committees that you're part of. Ask them to make personal safety education a part of the curriculum.
It's just unfortunate that we need to have these conversations in the first place, that our world is unsafe, but that is the reality. It is
Yeah.
unsafe, and it's our job to make sure that we remain safe and our children remain safe with it. And thank you, Juanita, so much for guiding us through how we can at least create some kind of a safe space for our children, and make them understand, as well as give ourselves some understanding of personal safety. Thanks so
Thank you,
much. Thank you
Parul.
so much.
Yeah.
To all
Thank
our
you,
viewers,
everyone.
thank you for watching.
Yes. Bye.